don't be a flat squirrel. And what I mean by that is that you need to be decisive in things that you're doing. That the road of life is paved with a bunch of flat squirrels who couldn't make a decision.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Randy Cook. Our show is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians to overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be. Visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com. because you're not in this alone. Well, today we're going to continue my interview with Dr. Lee Rogers, who had dreams of becoming a cardiologist, but instead he became an internationally renowned podiatrist and academician, not to mention film producer and politician along the way. So let's rejoin the conversation with Dr. Lee Rogers. One thing that impresses me, and if I've got the wrong impression, you can let me know. But as I look at your resume, it is my impression that you have been truly instrumental in advancing the awareness and the educational attention to limb salvage amongst the American Board of Podiatry. And if I'm wrong, please tell me. And either way, let's hear the story on that.
Well, it's a little of podiatry is such a small profession, right? So there's different groups, but everybody's kind of communicating with one another. There's only 15,000 podiatrists in the country, but the American Board of Podiatric Medicine, of which now I'm the president, is the certifying board, and the certifying board doesn't really do a lot of education. I mean, we publish our standards for the exam.
Right.
We created a separate exam, a certificate of added qualification, just about amputation prevention and wound care. And I did that even before I was president. I started the CAQ program at the board. But it's I think really more of that. Your statement would be entirely true if it was more about the APMA, American Podiatric Medical Association. I have worked very closely with the APMA to promote the multidisciplinary care of the diabetic foot. And it's not just me. It's there's the same few people that we've already mentioned that do this all the time. But it's an effort where we're bringing together the American Diabetes Association. We're working on a relationship now with the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists, also the Society for Vascular Surgery, which is probably one of the most notable partnerships between the APMA and probably the closest partner to a podiatrist is a vascular surgeon anyway, given the predominance of vascular disease and the diabetic foot. But anytime that there's anything that's published in the vascular literature, especially consensus documents and those types of things, like just recently, David and I were both, the podiatric co-authors of the Global Vascular Guidelines that was published around the world on how to take care of people with chronic limb-threatening ischemia. But we rehash this, put it into podiatric language. I'm not saying it's just different the way podiatrists look at a problem.
Sure.
So we put it into podiatric language. What's important out of this thing, and then publish it. Especially in our profession's journal, which I'm an associate editor of, the Journal of the American Podiatric Medical Association. Publish it there. We get APMA to really publicize it, to get it out to all the podiatrists, because that's the way that if your goal is to change the standard of care. You have a best practice that's been published, and a best practice is a best practice, whether it's a standard of care or not. The standard of care is a legal term about what are reasonable and prudent doctor in the same specialty doing in that community. Right. You want to raise that standard of care to mirror what's the best practice. The best practice is published by these societies and based on evidence. And so, that's really the goal, is to improve the standard of care to mirror the best practice. And that's what we've been doing.
And I think you've clearly done that. And what I think is most impressive about it is what we have alluded to before. And I'll have to tell you that certainly at the beginning of my medical career and even toward the middle and the end, if somebody had told me that there was going to be a collaboration between podiatrists and vascular surgeons and endocrinologists to accomplish something as significant as this, or even not accomplish anything, just that there was a collaboration, I would have thought it just can't be. But yet it has been done. And as I say, it certainly looks to me like you, among others, and I know there are some very important names in podiatry that we could talk about, but it has largely been the effort of you and people like you that brought this about. And there is absolutely no question that the world is a better place. I had a lengthy career in general surgery. I closed out my career managing a chronic wound care and hyperbaric medicine center. And as you can imagine, I learned more about the diabetic foot in that 12 years than I had in the previous 40. And again, thanks in large part to the contributions of podiatrists and others like you. So I, on behalf of all those, would like to thank you very much.
Well, it's our honor, honestly. We're all doing this for the same reason, and I find it as my duty. So I'm happy to do it.
Well, good for us. And I'm looking at the clock thinking maybe we should turn this into a 2-parter or a 3-parter, but I do want to get to some other things. And the next thing has to do with the follow-up or the result of exactly what we've been talking about, and that is you were instrumental in the beginning of a thing called Amputation Centers of America. Would you like to tell the audience about that?
Yeah, Amputation Prevention Centers of America. But
right.
So I started my first amputation prevention center in Des Moines, Iowa. After my fellowship, I was looking at where I could go to do the type of thing I was trained to do. And this, one of my mentors, as I mentioned before, Vince Mandrakia, he's a podiatrist, but he became the chief medical officer of Broadlawns Medical Center in Des Moines, Iowa. And he said, if you want something here, you can create something. We'll let you do it. It's going to be, we have the patient population, and we'd love to have you here. And so I did. I created the first center there, and was really successful. We wrote a lot of papers out of there. One in particular where we showed over the course of, I think it was about 18 months, maybe 20 something months, reduced the rate of major limb loss by 72% by implementing better strategies of care, and including a multidisciplinary team. And after that, I was kind of asked to do things all over the place. I got even Andrew Bolton had called me about coming to Miami. He was down there at the time. I was being recruited by some hospitals in Las Vegas to come out there. And then Armstrong had told me about a vascular surgeon out in Los Angeles who was a really well-known vascular surgeon, George Andros. And he was trying to create the same type of thing, an amputation prevention center or a limb salvage center, and needed a podiatrist to come out there. So I went out with somebody that was my co-fellow, Nick Bevilacqua, and we both went and started the second amputation prevention center. So amputation prevention center at Valley Presbyterian Hospital. And again, working with a vascular surgeon, having a research-oriented program, meaning that we kept track of everything we were doing so we could report on it. That program was really the spawn of a meeting called DEFCON, Diabetic Foot Global Conference, which is still going on today. And
big meeting.
It is a big meeting. It's now, it kind of replaced that Harkless meeting as the biggest meeting in the world for the diabetic foot. And so we started talking about all the things we were doing there. And it was out of that a couple of people had approached me who were business people. One, a nurse, Diane Boone, and another, a guy who used to be the CFO of a health plan, Miguel Sandoval. And I met them a couple of years prior to that, but they were actually managing this wound center at Valley Presbyterian Hospital. And I remember the day I met them, I walked in and the hospital introduced me, oh, these people are going to be managing the center. And I said, well, then you better find another doctor to be here because I don't work with management companies. That's what I said. And so they both looked at me, and I never met them before. They both looked at me and they were like, oh my God, I got to, and so because I had some experience with management companies, and you probably have as well. And yeah, people have positive and negative experiences. Mine were negative. So so then they took me out to dinner a week later and said, look, this is something we want to do. We want to create a limb salvage program, not a wound program. We're not going to be totally focused on HBO, because I'd seen some of the, misuse of HBO in the past and all of this. So I agreed to just be quiet and work with them. And then after a couple of years, they said, we're getting approached by people all over the place that said, how can we replicate what you're doing there? And so we want to create a business out of this, and we'd like you to be our medical director. And so I said, okay, how much are you going to pay me? And they said, oh, we can't pay you anything. We'll just give you some of the company. And so
you'll get top billing.
Yeah. So I said, well, I guess I have nothing else to lose. So we started this program, built it up to about 30 programs, and we sold it for around $30 million, like maybe 7 years later, to a company called Restorix Health in New York. And then they told me,
so you got your investment back.
Yeah, I got it back. And then they said, so then I thought, this is great. I'm not going to work anymore. And so then the Restorix came to talk to me, and they said, oh yeah, well, we're not going to buy you unless you come along with the deal. And,
oh boy.
And so they, my other friends told me, you made yourself too valuable in this proposition. You didn't have anybody else that you could fall back on. And so I said, okay, well, I guess I got to do it. So then I came on as the medical director for Restorix's amputation prevention centers, and we helped to build that out. And I stayed there actually until right before the pandemic. No, it was in the pandemic. During the pandemic, they were really curtailing a lot of stuff they were doing because of the, you probably saw some of the difficulties that even wound patients were having getting to clinics and all of that. So
absolutely.
So, yeah. But it's a different skill set to do that type of work than it is to be a doctor.
It really is. And my impression of physicians is that it doesn't come easily to most people that get into the healing arts. But we're lucky that you had a feel for it, and you've done very, very well. And a lot of people are walking around on 2 feet because of it too.
Well, thank you for that. I think that we've been very successful in our clinical work, but I think that you're when you're looking at that kind of work, you have to understand how to systematize an approach to a problem, and everything can't fit the system, but you have to systematize probably most of it, and that's just a different mentality. And actually, I'll tell you, being a pilot helps you with that, because I hear people talk all the time about, I don't want to be involved in checklist medicine and all of that. Mm-hmm. And you were a surgeon, and you understand how, really a lot of surgery is checklist medicine now, at least getting started anyway.
You bet. Yeah.
And I do want to be involved in some checklist medicine. And I want to be, if I'm a patient, just like I want the pilot to go through a checklist whenever he's just starting out the flight, or if there's a problem, I'd like my doctor to do that too, especially my surgeon. So I don't see it as such of a negative as some others do. I think that some physicians feel like it's a little bit of a loss of autonomy, but I don't think so.
Lee, I'll and again, I hate to make myself part of the show, but I want to just mention to you, it's interesting to me how long it takes an idea like this to actually grow. When I was in medical school, the famous John Kirkland was the head of cardiac surgery at University of Alabama in Birmingham, and I did a rotation on his service. And what was interesting about the way he did surgery was that the instructions for every operation, from coronary artery bypass to a complete repair of tetralogy of Fallot, every operation was described in a step-by-step fashion and put into an enormous book that was in a lot of places. I mean, a loose leaf book, because he had to change things from time to time. And there were copies in the hands of all his residents and lots of other places. And I watched one of the most famous cardiac surgeons in the world perform heart surgery. I was in his operating room, and I watched him perform these operations. And from time to time, he would come to a point and he would look over the ether screen and say, "What's next, Rudy?" Mm-hmm. Rudy was the anesthesiologist, and Rudy had the book up there. And Dr. Kirkland knew that it was very important to do everything in the right order every time. Now, this was 1973, 74. And it's taken that long, but now it really has become something, we may not be doing it so voluntarily, but it is gradually becoming the way that we do things. And your allusion to cockpit management is exactly correct.
Right.
There are times when you can't afford to leave out a step or do it wrong or whatever. And again, great insight on your part to understand how important it is to build this into exactly what you're talking about. So you have once again been very instrumental in advancing the healing arts in a way that I think a lot of people wouldn't have thought to look, because it's not in the science book, it's not in the biology book, right? It's in the management of human skills.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians for physicians to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests, whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics. Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview. Look, before we run completely out of time, there are a couple of other things that I want to talk to you about, and you might have to come back and talk again because this is fun for me. If you don't mind, I am really curious about why any physician, particularly one who is as well educated and successful and renowned as you, would have any interest in getting into politics.
Well, so I ran for United States House of Representatives in 2012 and 2014. Well, those were the elections. So you run for 2 full years before the election. Mm-hmm. So you even start running in 2010, before your 2012 election. For House of Representatives, I mean, it's basically as soon as the election's over, you're already campaigning for the next one because it's every 2 years. But I was just fed up with the way that the government was acting on healthcare. And this was post the Affordable Care Act, which, I was equally as complimentary and as critical of the Affordable Care Act. It did a lot of great things, but also didn't go far enough in some areas. And it's funny when you get into politics and you're not provocative or emotional about certain topics, you don't do as well. I had to learn to do that in rallies and in speeches, because if you take an entirely pragmatic approach to things and say, oh yeah, well, there's lots of different opinions, and it's something you and I would have a scientific discussion about, that doesn't work. Nobody elects that person. They elect the craziest speaking person that is out there, and they get excited about that.
It's kind of the polar opposite of things that we do, and that's why I'm fascinated that you're willing to take it on.
Yeah, I got a lot of advice I hired some good consultants and said, if I want to do this and if I want to make a difference, how do I do it right? And even everything from, you had to have somebody come in and tell you that I couldn't have a beard at the time, because they said nobody's been elected to Congress with a beard since for 60 something years or whatever. They're like, it looks dubious.
Wow.
And so they have an image consultant that comes in and they tell you this is what you have to wear, and they go to the store with you, go shopping. Then you have a speaking consultant that also works on your body language so that you don't seem wishy-washy on topics, especially they're like, anytime you're talking about national security, you can't ever do something where you have your palms up. It looks like the body language of that is like you don't know or you're not sure. So instead you make a fist and you have one hand over the other fist, and that makes you appear strong. And, so all these things you have to learn how to do. A lot of it actually made me a better speaker, public speaker anyway. How to get over nervousness too is a thing. That's an area that I wasn't used to speaking about. I could speak about any topic in my field, but you're asked to give an opinion on so many things that you have no idea about, and they just want to know. And if you say you don't know, that's the wrong answer, and that's not right. That's not the way that things should be.
Because your opponent will claim to know.
Yeah. So I did it because I wanted to go in there and make a difference on a policy scale for healthcare. As we just were saying, I was used to writing policies. I'm used to doing pathways and that type of thing. And I thought I could make a difference that way as well. And running for Congress was both some of the best parts of my life, but also some of the worst. It gives you an insight into how that political machine works. That's not pretty, and and I was the party candidate. I was endorsed by the DCCC. I was put on the red to blue list, which they had everybody coming out to help me and all of that. And I lost my first election by a very narrow margin. And the guy who I was running against, he'd been in office for 26 years, and he had always won his elections by like 20 plus points. And and this was a narrow margin. And so he retired the next year. And then it was an open seat, which there aren't very many of those every year. So I had to run again, but that was 2014. And 2014 was going to be a bad year for Democrats, no matter where you were, how pragmatic you were, or anything. And I knew that, but I couldn't not run, just finishing so well the year before, and then also having an open seat. So I ran there and lost by a narrower margin, but still lost. So it's difficult to do when you move around a lot. People think you're a carpetbagger, but you move around for work. You go help people out in one part of the country, you go to another part, but there's always these claims about you. So it's difficult to do, but I'm still interested in it. It's just, I feel really bad mostly for all of my friends, everybody in the country who it's amazing how much money you have to raise for an election to Congress. So I think the second time I raised like 1.6 million or something like that. And it's basically everybody you sit down with a finance coordinator and they go through your Rolodex, but also your memory. Like, who did you know in high school? Who? Yeah. And so they're like, everybody in your class, do you have an old yearbook? Let's go through and look at every person. Literally, they do this. Let's go through how much, and they just put a number on people. How much money can this person give you for the election? And I said, I haven't talked to that person since high school. They're like, well, yeah, we're going to call them. And they said, our research people, so you have a research person, they find the person's phone number. You call them. Hey, it's Lee Rogers. Hey, I haven't talked to you in so long. How are things going? And you have to do a direct ask in these cases. So you can't be wishy-washy about that either. I really need you to help out for this election. It is so important. Can you donate $500? You start out with something like that. With doctors, you always start out with the max.
You bet.
At that time, it was like $2,700 or something, $2,500. Let's just say, can you donate $2,500? And if then they're like, oh man, I mean, everybody's the same way. Oh man, it's tax season. I'm just buying a new thing for my practice or whatever. So you have to negotiate with them. These are your friends. You have to negotiate with them. Oh, well, how about $2,000? Well, that's still really steep. What if you did $500 a quarter this year? So I just give us your credit card. We'll just charge you once a quarter, $500. So you still get $2,000 in the election. And they teach you, your staff teaches you how to do this stuff. It is so uncomfortable. Nobody wants to do that. So
I can't even imagine. Yeah. Any chance you'll do it again ever?
There's a chance, but it's slimmer than it was before.
I gotcha.
Yeah, it certainly gives me a lot of anxiety and I don't get anxious about anything, but I almost ran again when the person that was in the seat a few cycles later was a Democrat, and she had to resign over a scandal. And so then it was an open special election, and the party called me and said, "Hey, we really want you to run. You've got the best name ID." And I was thinking about it, and I was just getting remarried. My first wife said, "If you run for Congress, we're going to get a divorce." And so I was just getting remarried, and I literally was getting remarried like in a week, and this just happened, out of the blue. And so they said, "We need you to make a decision. You have to make a decision by 2 days. You have to let us know within 2 days." And so I just couldn't sleep at night. I had such bad anxiety just remembering what it was like, and remembering how tough it was on my ex-wife, and just thinking about just getting married and how difficult that would be. So I said no, at that point. But it's nothing. I don't wish running for Congress on my worst enemy. I'll tell you that. So
it sounds like something that you definitely wouldn't do for fun, and hopefully you would do it only because of intense motivation.
Yeah.
One other thing that I want to talk about before we get into your prescriptions for success is one of the other things that you did while you were out in sunny California was to get involved in the world of filmmaking. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, one of my patients was Stephen First, who was in Animal House. He was Flounder in Animal House, and Stephen.
That's a pretty good connection.
Yeah, he was, and he had. He and I spoken publicly about this at meetings and things like that, so I can talk about it for all the HIPAA conscious people in the audience, but. Stephen had bilateral Charcot foot, and I saved both of his legs from amputation. And afterwards, he came and said to me, "Hey, I really," and we'd struck a little bit of a friendship. We talked about the movies every time he came in and all of that. And he said, "Hey, I really want to get you involved in one of my movies." And I said, I thought it meant like getting on set and maybe like being in something real quick, or just like hanging out as a doctor on set. And I said, "Get involved how?" And he said, "Well, you give me a bunch of money and you're a producer." And so,
kind of like politics.
Exactly right. Yeah. So then my accountant told me that is a really dumb idea. He says, "I have so many people in Southern California who have lost their shirt in the movies and all of this." And so so then Stephen convinced me. This movie, which was called Cold Moon, came out in I think it was 2016, but I think we did it in 2014, but it came out in 2016. He convinced me this horror / thriller movie that horror and thriller movies always do well, and especially he was already got like a Halloween release date for the movie. It was going to be in the theater, and he told me that the total budget of the movie is like $1.5 million, and he said, "Look, if he said $5 million is the danger number." He said, "If you get up to $5 million, if it doesn't do well in the theater, you lost a lot of money. But this is so low that even if it just goes to at that time, we didn't even have a lot of great online services and things that we even do now. But he said, even if it just goes to DVD or it just goes to TV, you still make your money back on $1.5 million. So the risk is really low." And so I agreed to do it. And then the movie did really well. And so then I talked to my accountant again after the movie did really well, and I had made some money on it. And I said, "Hey, what do I do with all this money?" And he said, "Well, you're really screwed." He says, it's like the 27th of the year, and we had gotten paid on it, the 27th of December of the year. We got paid, yeah. And he said, we weren't planning on this." He says, I do your taxes, but I didn't plan on this." He says, "You are really screwed." And he said, "The only thing you can do is you have to create a business and put the money into the business. But it has to be the same business that it came from, and you have to operate that business like a business." He said, "You can't, if you just put it in there and do a slow draw, he said, that's actually tax fraud." He says, "You can't do that." He says, "You have to create a business and operate it." And he says, "You can do that, reinvest it in the same business." And I said, "So you mean movies?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "But you told me not to do that." He goes, "Oh, that's before you made this money, so." So I created this.
Changed my mind.
I know, yeah. So I created this business, Lee Rogers Films, and basically all I was doing was just going to be making movies out of it, and so we put all the money in Lee Rogers Films, and then the next several years we made a bunch of really awful shark movies. And that was on purpose. Sci-Fi had come to Steven and his son Griff. We have Shark, how they have Shark Week on Discovery Channel. That's awesome. Right. I love Shark Week. That's my favorite week of the year. I just take off work and watch Shark Week all week. But they have Sharknado Week. So it's on Sci-Fi. They do a Sharknado premiere, and they need a bunch of awful shark movies to complement that one, because they have to have a whole week worth of movies. So we produced Ghost Shark, Atomic Shark. I made a cameo in Atomic Shark. I got burned in a parasail by a shark that was radioactive. What else did we made? Trailer Park Shark, Nightmare Shark. Oh my! And so all of these movies we made for Sci-Fi, and it was actually a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I learned a lot too from that industry in how to move things along even in healthcare. We're recording videos now for patients so that I don't have to say the same thing over and over again to every patient, and we're texting them videos and things like this. So it's interesting how all these things come together.
It really is.
And so because of the shark movies, and also because of my interest in Sharko Foot, when I bought my boat in 2016-ish or so, I bought a 42-foot Sea Ray sedan bridge, nice boat. I was in Southern California, just go back and forth to Catalina all the time. It was after my divorce, so I just needed something to have to occupy my time, and so I named it Sharko. Sharko, which was a play on words from Sharko Foot, but also from the shark movies.
Right.
And it was a lot of fun, but it was a tribute to my shark movie interest. But I really, I don't think about that. That wasn't a part that really influenced my life that much. It was just fun. I get the movies, but yeah. So really now,
everybody needs a hobby.
Yeah. Well, before we do the prescriptions, I do want to talk just briefly about where I am now. And you had,
please do.
Yeah, you and I had talked.
If you've got the time, I'm ready for you to go ahead. Yeah,
I have plenty of time. You and I had talked earlier this summer, and that's when we got our time zones confused, because I was in California and all of this. But I was getting ready to move. I'd already taken this job, but I didn't tell anybody about it yet. But I'm now the chief of podiatry at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio, and this came along after the job got posted first, and it's the first job that I actually did not create for myself. I'm going to talk about this in my prescriptions. Every other job I've had, I created for myself. This one was the first time I ever answered an ad. So I saw this job, and it really is one of the most important jobs in the profession of podiatry.
I was going to say what we're talking about here is perhaps the most renowned seat of podiatric medicine in this country. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think it's one of, or if not the, it certainly is considered that for the diabetic foot. I mean, this university spawned, the program here spawned all of the greats in the diabetic foot. Everybody from Harkless to Lavery, Armstrong, Steinberg, LaFontaine, all of these people came through UT and learned and did research here on the diabetic foot. And this program is also, astonishingly, as a podiatry residency program, it's coming up on its 50th anniversary next year. I mean, think about that.
No kidding.
How many actual MD residency programs are 50 years old? And this is
exactly
50 years old. It's in the Department of Orthopedics, which is also sometimes podiatrists and orthopedists don't get along so well, as you know. But this is a great fit here in the Department of Orthopedics at UT. And so my charge, here is to help, rebuild the reputation, the national reputation that this program, once had, to recreate a robust research enterprise and oversee this educational program of excellence. It's coming at a unique time in Texas, because Larry Harkless is starting the next podiatry school. There's only 9 in the country. This is going to be the 10th one at University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, which is just about 3 hours south of San Antonio. If I didn't even know you could go 3 hours south of San Antonio and still be in that country, but it is. He's starting the next podiatry program there for podiatry school, and it's the first state-sponsored school, sponsored by University of Texas, falls under the Board of Regents, and so it's really going to be kind of a podiatry renaissance or explosion, and it's going to happen right here in Texas. And this is where most of the training is going to occur. So it was a position that when I saw it, I knew it, having known all the people that have sat in this seat and the impact that you could make being in the seat, I knew it was something that would be right for me. And so that's why I'm here. And I really do think we're going to help to propel the profession and the field of the diabetic foot, which is more than just our profession. It's about everybody, in the world that's taking care of the diabetic foot. We're going to be very generous with our time and our knowledge and do what we should be doing at a university.
Well, I'm very inclined to think, and frankly, I know quite a number of other people who are going to think that they have got the right person for the job. So I wish you great success in that oncoming endeavor. The institution is probably very fortunate that you were a failure at politics, right? Because now they get to have a good man in that job. So, well, congratulations to them and congratulations to you. Lee, I have really enjoyed this conversation, and we don't do a lot of return guests on Prescription for Success, but it's been a lot of fun. So we might just have to have you back, or maybe I'll get you and Armstrong on the same show. That should be quite a comical event.
and especially if we do something about 6 months in the future from now, I'll really have a lot to tell you about rebuilding the program and how what we're doing. So
we'll have some stories. Well, we'll look forward to that. In the meantime, I want to give you an opportunity to share some of your wisdom without my interruption. So I'm going to close my mic, and Dr. Lee Rogers is going to give us his personal prescriptions for success.
All right. And these, I'm really honored to be able to do this, by the way. And I hopefully these will help people. They're not really about medicine, but they are about medicine. And it's about really how to, I think, create yourself into the type of person that can make a difference. So the first one is about creation. And one of my favorite quotes is that life isn't about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself, from George Bernard Shaw. And I'll tell you, it just like I did to you, Randy, just a few minutes ago, that until this job where I am at UT, every other job I've ever had in my life, I created it. And I don't mean, private practice and that type of thing. I mean that I convinced hospitals and other people to hire me without even having a job posting. I convinced them that they needed somebody like me to be able to do what it is. But you have to approach that understanding what the problem is and making a case for yourself. And I tell young people who are sometimes disheartened when they're looking for jobs and they're like, I really want to go to Cleveland, or hopefully not because of the Browns, but I really want to go to Cleveland, for example, and I just can't find any jobs there. I'm really, I'm disappointed. My family lives there, or whatever reason that you want to be there. But and I say, well, why not create a job for yourself? You can do that. So you research the area, you find out who the physician recruiters are at the different hospitals. You make a case for yourself. You go in there, you tell them what you're going to do, how it's going to be different from other things, and you basically write the job posting for yourself. What's your ideal job? Write it for yourself, and then fulfill that job. And it's not going to work every time, but it's worked most of the time for me in that case. And so I did. I created all these jobs. And so you can do the same thing. And I like this quote from Peter Drucker. He says that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so if you want to predict your own future, you just create your own future. My second prescription, I got 3 prescriptions. So I'm on my second one. My second one is don't be a flat squirrel. And what I mean by that is that you need to be decisive in things that you're doing. That the road of life is paved with a bunch of flat squirrels who couldn't make a decision. So don't be that flat squirrel. Make a decision and move on. And what that means is that you can't be afraid to fail, because in reality, I failed a lot. Randy just said I'm a failed congressman, and that's true. Failed politician in that case, and I'm not embarrassed by my failures. And the number of times you succeed is proportional to the number of times you fail. So there's countless examples of that in people who, whether you're, Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs or anybody, there are countless examples of that. But in that, you also need to think about time. Time gets away from you quick. You make decisions on what you can do, what's most important to you, and do that. Because if you waste hours, those wasted hours turn into wasted days, and wasted days turn into a month, And next thing you know, a decade has passed. Unless you're a vampire, you don't have too many of those to spend wasted. So don't waste your time. Be decisive and move on. And then the last prescription: don't burn any bridges. So I know that Don Henley from the Eagles, he said, sometimes you get your best light from a burning bridge. But I really think that if you burn your bridges, and you ask the same person to send you a boat, that's probably not going to happen. And you really need everyone in your life to help you succeed. And if you're successful, you're going to make some enemies. And, they say about Alexander Hamilton, he made enemies as fast as he made friends. But when it's okay to have differences of opinion with people, you maintain, a professional relationship with, you have scientific discourse. That's fine, but don't burn those bridges. And I also tell the people who are residents, especially, that never burn the bridge, especially if anybody in your residency program or your residency director, because that's the person that every time you apply for privileges at the next hospital is going to have to fill out that form. And maybe they'll fill it out truthfully, but they have a certain amount of time to fill it out, and they might just wait the whole 3 months and fill it out then, and you're not going to get your privileges very fast. So it's important to think about all of that as you're moving through life, and take differences of opinion just as that. Don't make enemies you don't have to. And so those are my three prescriptions. I'll say that the last bit here is just one of my other favorite quotes, and this is so true in pretty much everything that I do, is that to achieve great things, two things are needed. And that is plan and not quite enough time. And that's how you achieve great things. So Randy, thanks so much for having me on. And hopefully those prescriptions are going to help people in the audience.
Well, thank you for being here, Lee. And thank you for sharing with us. I have an idea that this entire conversation is going to affect somebody somewhere. You just never know. And it's been a pleasure having you here today. Before you go, I want to give you an opportunity to go ahead with some shameless self-promotion. So tell people where they can find you, where they can follow you, and share whatever you like with us.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's probably pretty easy to find me at the university. It's also really easy to find me on Facebook. I think my handle is just Lee C. Rogers. On Twitter, I'm Lee Rogers DPM. LinkedIn, I think, is also either Lee Rogers DPM or Lee C. Rogers. So having run for office before, you don't really hide on social media very easily. So you can,
I guess.
Yeah, you can find me pretty much anywhere on any of the social media platforms. If anybody's interested in looking at that video that I mentioned about Dr. Paul Brand, really that's a video that should go down in history. And I'm going to try to do that with my platform my newly given platform here at the university. And I'm really going to promote the things that he was saying in his history. That's on my YouTube page, which again is Lee C. Rogers. I'm open. I'm always happy to have conversations with people, and let's keep the dialogue open.
Great. Dr. Lee Rogers, Chief of Podiatry and Associate Professor of Orthopedics, University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio, Texas. It has been a great pleasure having you here. Thank you again. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, you can get more information about our guests and hear them face my rapid-fire questions at our Patreon site. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the podcast and give us a rating, and hopefully offer suggestions on what you'd like to hear in future episodes. Thanks very much to Ryan Jones, who composed and performs our theme music for us. That wraps it up for now, so be sure and fill your prescription for success with my next episode.